Welcome to CMC. I'm Kermit Whitfield, and I have the honor of being both a member of the CMC Board and the Capital Crossroads Special Improvement District Board. So getting to preside over today's forum that brings these two great organizations together, it's kind of like Christmas for me. I'm sure you all feel the same way. It's great to see everyone today. Today's forum, State of Downtown, is brought to us with support from the Edwards Companies, represented by their associates here today. Raise your hands, please. Where are you, Edwards Companies, folks? There they are, right there in front. Downtown Columbus has a lot going for it. Public and private investment has increased significantly. Thousands of people have moved downtown, and thousands more are on their way. And thanks to the good work of the Capital Crossroads Special Improvement District, the City of Columbus, and many other partners, our downtown is one of the cleanest and safest of any city in the country. We have a lot to be optimistic about. But let's face it, we have a long way to go. Though we have developed pockets of vibrancy, the fact that the single largest land use in downtown is still surface parking lots indicates that we have years of development ahead of us before we can create the kind of uniformly dense and vibrant downtown where tens of thousands of people live, work, and play. To discuss the state of downtown and its challenges and opportunities, we have assembled what is truly a dream team of local experts. Executive Director of the Capital Crossroads and Discovery Special Improvement Districts, Cleve Ricksecker. Capital Crossroads and Discovery Special Improvement District's Deputy Director of Research, Planning, and Facilities, Marc Conte. Development Director, the City of Columbus, Steve Schoeney, and Jordan Davis, Chair of the Create Columbus Commission. Marc will start us off with a summary of this year's State of Downtown report, and Cleve will host our conversation. Marc, the podium is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Kermit, and thanks to the Metropolitan Club for having us today. It's an honor to be here, and thank you all for attending, and it's great to see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. As Kermit mentioned, I'm with the Capital Crossroads and Discovery Special Improvement Districts. These two districts were created by property owners to provide services in the public realm, including cleaning, supplemental safety, landscaping, promotions, and advocacy. I hope that you have seen or interacted with our uniformed ambassadors in each of these districts. These are the folks who are really helping keep downtown clean and safe. Putting this report together was a team effort in the office, but I do want to call out Casey Brandkamp, who's here, a current staff member, and also a former staff member who's here, Shannon Fergus, for their work on the report, as well as the entire staff, and a lot of whom are here today as well. In most instances, when we talk about downtown, we are referring to the area bounded by the three highways, Interstate 670, 70, and 71, and then the railroad tracks on the Scioto Peninsula to the west. We've been collecting data on this area since 2002. In front of you, you will find a placemat that provides some of the highlights from the report. You'll find a full report online. We could also get a hard copy to you as well. The overall state of downtown is undoubtedly strong. The amount of construction activity we're seeing, it's amazing. It's the most I've ever seen since I've been collecting this data since 2002, and probably the most amount of construction I've seen since I've lived here since 1988. I'll touch briefly, though, on each of the sectors that we track. First is housing. Downtown housing market is very strong. I'm estimating right now our population within downtown to be 8,100 people, and that downtown will cross the 10,000 resident threshold sometime in 2019. For comparison, back in the year 2000, we only had 3,488 residents within downtown. We have 1,360 housing units under construction and another 733 units proposed. The question I'm asked all the time, though, and most often, is, are these units filling up? And the answer is absolutely. Downtown's apartment occupancy is at 97%. It's higher than the regional and national average. On the for sale side with housing, we saw only 14 new condominium units sell in 2016, but that's largely due to the low inventory that we have of brand new for sale product. We are now seeing multiple developers offering for sale units, and this is the first time that's happened since the Great Recession. Last year, Crawford Hoying announced a new apartment building at the Swan Cleaner site on South High Street. One reason it's worth mentioning is that they are proposing only 22 parking spaces for 120 residential units. We will have to wait and see, though, whether that becomes the trend for new, larger apartment buildings. Over in the Discovery District, Motorist Insurance announced a 68-unit project that is the first phase of what will be the development of 7 acres of surface parking adjacent to their headquarters. Turning to retail, Capital Crossroads has documented the strong market demand for retail, and entrepreneurs we see are trying to respond. In the report, we highlight a small cluster on Long Street between 3rd and 4th, which contains 4 great retailers, Spoonful Records, Downtown Bike Shop, and Jewelweed Floral Studio, and the Long Street Collective's Tattoo Studio. And they're really trying to make a go of it because they are a cluster with each other. I would expect, though, to see a mini boom of retail activity once, and not just restaurants and bars, once we see some more product come to the market. We have new retail space getting added on South High between Town and Main, and the new space also added on North High between Gay and Long on both sides of the street. So the projects of the Edwards companies and the Day companies on North High are going to be critical to attracting new retail to downtown. Looking at hospitality, our hotel occupancy rate right now is at 70.4%, and new to hotel development is pretty hot. There are 556 rooms either proposed or under construction, and that'll be an increase of 14% over our current hotel room inventory. And then if you step back a little and look at that larger market area going from downtown through the Short North all the way up to the University District, there's a total of 1,141 rooms proposed or under construction. And that doesn't even take into account the recent announcements for Scioto Peninsula and also the Battelle site. Most of these new proposals are in the boutique category. Downtown also has a large education sector. Many people are surprised to learn that we have 33,000 college students within downtown at 4 different institutions. We have Columbus State, Franklin University, Columbus College of Art and Design, and the Capital University Law School. Plus, we have a for-profit school, Miami Jacobs. If all of these students were at the same institution, it would be the equivalent of a Big Ten university, and it's as big or bigger than Iowa, Nebraska, and Northwestern. Now, enrollment is down. You'll see this on the placemat. Enrollment is down from a peak of in 2011 of just under 41,000, but this is largely due to the nature of these institutions. They tend to see enrollments fluctuate with the economy. So during economic downturns, people will go back to school. When the economy is good, people will get done with their degree and go back into the workforce. And so the drop in enrollment mostly is due to the economic recovery since the Great Recession. Finally, though, the office market. The overall downtown vacancy rate is 12%, and that's for Class A and B office space. But that vacancy rate alone isn't going to tell you everything that's happening within the downtown office market. Average asking lease rates increased each of the last 2 years, which is good. But when adjusted for inflation, lease rates in downtown are 28% lower than what they were in 1999. And the vacancy situation is worse in some buildings around Capitol Square. If you take a look at the lower left-hand side of your placemat, Capitol Square's office vacancy rate is 17%, so it's higher than downtown as a whole, and its availability rate is 24%, and this doesn't include the Class C office space. One building, the Fifth Third Center, is in receivership, and we're starting to see other buildings around the square where deferred maintenance is becoming visible. So I'm going to wrap it up here so we can get to our panel, but in closing, the health of downtown is generally strong and continued growth is expected, but we have some challenges. Continued investment is dependent on continued regional population growth and job creation. Retail activity is still somewhat limited, and we have some distressed large office properties, mostly on Capitol Square. So as I mentioned, the report is available online on our website at downtowncolumbus.com, and we can also provide a hard copy. Now I'll turn it over to Cleve.
All right, now we're going to talk about what all this means. But before we start, I want to just point out that Steve Schoeney has chosen to celebrate his birthday today with all of you. So I think I want to start off with some conversation about the office market, because I think it may come as a surprise for many people in the room to find out that the office market, and at least large portions of downtown, is very soft at this point. And so I want to start with Steve and then move on to you, Marc. Why is the office market in the core of downtown struggling?
I think there are a couple of things. One is, as many of you know, I don't even know when this started, but there is no parking requirement for downtown. So what happened when the buildings around Capitol Square were built is they weren't built with parking associated with them. And then as we've seen the great development on the surface parking lots and those going away, it has created a real parking crunch for those structures. You combine that with the fact that they're not the kind of floor plate that the growing companies that we see, that's not their first preference. We're seeing companies go into that, and if you have buildings that have been well maintained, if you have buildings that have that the owners have taken creative looks at how to update the building, I think the Huntington Center is a good example of a building that is on Capitol Square and has remained a very vibrant address. You see good results. In other buildings that are a little bit more dated, that have the parking problem, it's a challenge to lease them. And so that's some of what you see with the Fifth Third building. That's some of what you see with some of the other buildings on State Street.
And to follow up on that, we talk a little bit about this in our office highlight in the report, the changing nature of office space, cloud-based, paperless, more open workstations, open floor plans. But aside from that, what we've been hearing from brokers at the SID over the last several years is just the lack of parking is really limiting their ability to get new deals. Now, we think the parking deficit is probably on the order of 4,000 parking spaces. And certainly we need more parking, but I don't see anybody in a stampede to build all 4,000 parking spaces. And I think we got to look at some other options. We conducted a pilot study several years ago among four downtown employers to see if we could get more people to switch to transit. We had some very good results. If you look on your placemat in the lower right-hand corner, you can see how many cars have to come into downtown for every 100 workers. Right now it's 87. Over 20 years ago it was only 79. So as we're adding more employees, a lot more of them are driving their own car that then needs to be warehoused throughout the day. And we think shifting to transit could really open up some more opportunities to lease some additional space.
So behaving like a city might help downtown. Now, I want to follow up on something. You had mentioned the vacancy rate on Cap Square is 17%, or Cap Square area is 17%, the higher availability. What's the difference between availability and vacancy?
A vacancy is space that's currently vacant, nobody's occupying it. Available space might be occupied, but that tenant has probably not renewed their lease and said their intention that they're going to be leaving.
Well, here's my question. Some of the most interesting space in downtown is Class C space. If you look at what Ricky Day and Don DeVere are doing, Lauren Tonti with a property at 34 North High Street, Crosschecks is in a former Ford dealership at the corner of Main and 3rd. These are like Class C or not even Class C spaces, but these are the most interesting spaces. And yet I'm hearing from you that that would drive the vacancies even higher, that we're not even counting what's happening to the Class C. Aren't those the most important spaces in some cases?
Yeah, that's right. The Class C space, if you were to add that in, would probably drive the vacancy and the availability much higher. And those are the spaces we think are going to be the really interesting ones, especially for entrepreneurs, small startups, the kind of the cool space that a lot of people are looking for today.
Let's move on to housing. This is the bright spot relating down.
Cleve, can I come back to one
please.
thing? Unfortunately, we're on the wrong side of this building, but that point about taking creative, cool space, I will tell you, a couple years ago, we sold the old municipal light plant to Connect Realty and Brad DeHaze. And back in like December, I got to do a tour of what he's done to that building so far. The interior of that those three buildings, there's three buildings over there, are going to be amazing. And it's going to be space like nothing you've ever seen. And I think what Ricky's doing with the buildings at High and Gay are the same thing. I think what Edwards companies are doing with the old Citizens Bank building. Sometimes it just takes the market getting to a certain place in terms of what the rents will bear, whether it's for residential or for office, and getting the financing in place that's tough. And I think we're going to see some spaces that will blow people's minds come online here within the next 2 years that I think will really change the environment.
Well, let's move on to housing. We heard a pretty rosy report about what is happening with housing in downtown. And I think I heard you say, Marc, there are 1,360 units that are under construction right now. How long, panel, can downtown sustain this kind of residential growth?
Are you looking to me?
Well, any of us.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
So Thank you for having me, Cleve and the Sid. So I live downtown. I've lived downtown for about 3 years. I would say my rent has gone up significantly since I first started living downtown. Still in a bearable state, but definitely looking like it could be a lot more. So I would say one of the threats as a resident is, will you get priced out? And then who does downtown become for? And I think that what I've loved about downtown is that it's becoming a neighborhood. So when I was growing up in Central Ohio, you would come downtown and it was always a destination, either for work or a play or a show. It was never a place for a lifestyle. No one ever lived downtown. That was a weird concept. But now people want to be downtown. They want to live downtown, and the hardware, meaning the buildings, are actually keeping up with the demand of that type of environment. But I think we've got to look at how do we continue to make downtown attractive. We have to make it affordable in a way that you don't have to have a car plus a rent that's competitive to a Chicago or another large city. We have to look at the lifestyle amenities that are accessible to residents. So do we have retail that fits the daily, everyday needs to live someone's life? Do we have the culture that we can walk around in the streets and see? So that environmental lifestyle, the streets, the energy that's downtown that people want, that has to come with these new buildings so that people will want to continue to live downtown.
And if you take a look at the regional projections for population growth, they're estimating on average 25,000 new residents every year, for decades. Those people are going to have to live somewhere, and I think downtown's going to capture a good portion of them. And with the rising rents, the problem we're seeing is really just simple supply and demand. We have very high demand for living in downtown, and the supply is trying to keep up.
I honestly, when I started this job just short of 4 years ago, and in that time there's clearly been no slowing in the market, and what has become clear is that all the demographic changes that I think there's probably been like 15 CMC forums on all the demographic changes that are happening are really true, and you see that in the market demand. At the end of the day, the planners and the demographers can do all the stuff they want, but at the end of the day, it comes down to is stuff selling and renting, and it doesn't stop. I mean, every time I look at the numbers on vacancy, I'm just shocked because I keep expecting it. So that's why I keep expecting the vacancy to go up, and that's why when we look at the ability to absorb some really big projects over the next few years, we're pretty bullish on it. There will be a slowdown that's coming. I think the banks are looking at how much debt they have into multifamily at this point, and you're seeing that part of the market change, and you're seeing how banks look at multifamily projects a little differently. So I think you may see a slowdown in the market somewhat because of the financing environment, but I don't think you're seeing a slow in the demand for residential.
Jordan, you're somebody who lives and works downtown. Mm-hmm. What are some of the frustrations and some of the joys that you're experiencing in downtown?
Sure. So I'll start with the things I love about downtown. So what I love about downtown is the cleanliness. So there's not another downtown urban environment I've been to that, has really no litter. It's well lit. You can walk and not have dirty sidewalks. It's just very clean. The environment is really inviting, and I appreciate that a great deal as a resident. The passion around the people in the urban core is really so exciting to be around. There's a lot of you that I feel like I'm representing the urban gurus, a lot of you in the audience, so I have a lot to represent up here, but there is so much passion for Columbus to be as good as it can be, starting with the urban core, and that's really exciting to be a part of and that story to build with. That's great. The safety, I want to say this with caution because I hate to hear the story of Reagan Tokes, and it really breaks my heart that happened in our own city. But I find myself to be very safe downtown. It's well lit. I appreciate the on-demand escort service that the SID provides. When I do have a car at work, I can get to my garage, I can have an escort if I'm staying late. Those are things that I think people take for granted, and they're readily accessible when you work downtown, and that is tremendously valuable. The theaters are fantastic. If you want to pay to go see something, there's nothing like coming downtown to do it. It's nothing like walking to go see a show and then going home. That's brilliant. I love it. It's great. The things that I don't appreciate so much are the inconsistent business hours. So a lot of what's going on in downtown, from my view, is a chicken and egg syndrome. So if we didn't have the density of residents, therefore you didn't entice businesses to stay open on Saturdays and Sundays. They only stayed open during the office hours when they had a critical mass of people. Like Chipotle in the Arena District, right? Like, come on, it's Chipotle. It should be open all the time. Like, like the coffee shops. Like, there's things like that we're still inherited the old downtown business hours, that now that it's a neighborhood, we need to kind of take some risks again and stay open later and push the bar on that one. The urban highways, it's like not enjoyable to walk around sometimes when you've got a 4-lane road at 35 miles per hour coming at you, and downtown all destined to a freeway. There's got to be some more urban, sure, it might be inconvenient for a car, which gets to my main one. This car monopoly is really not enjoyable. Like the surface parking lots, it just kills the energy. We got to create greater value out of those, that land. And if we could make the Gay Street revitalization is just phenomenal. Think about the neighborhood launch and the fact that we took that one-way road and made it 2 ways, and you've got such a great corridor there that really can be something fantastic. What could we do with 4th and 3rd? So I live on 4th, so I see it all the time, so that's why you get that. And I think one of the interesting things, and I was talking with Cleve the other day, is just the access to retail and to like a corner store. And what I say that with the notion that at the same time I could get Amazon in 2 hours. So if I needed like sugar or something, I could probably just order it on my phone. But if I wanted to get dinner out, or I wanted to go get groceries, I still need to get into a car to go to Kroger. And those are things that I think are growing pains. Again, as we get the density of residents, we'll create the demand, and I think the local business community will step up to service those needs. But we should really think about how do we ensure that in these little corridors, our downtown's very big, but where we've got a lot of density, how are we ensuring that we're creating the right type of business growth to support the lifestyle of someone downtown?
Well, it's interesting. I do totally agree with your comment about the surface parking lots just deadening downtown. But, and we'll probably lose those lots. As those lots go away, the challenge of trying to have an urban, vibrant district will increase because we have a choice. We either park cars or we have activity. And so that's the challenge for downtown. It gets back to your point, Marc, about somehow encouraging and maybe incentivizing a shift from this idea of single occupancy, commuting into downtown to some other form of commuting. I want to talk about retail, and this is something that I think everyone probably feels a little bit dismayed about in downtown, and that is, we have all this housing that's growing, this being built in downtown. Where is the retail? Why isn't there more? When will we see it? Thoughts, Marc?
I would, well, as I mentioned, we documented, beginning back in 2009, the strong market demand for retail, and then we went about to see, well, why aren't we getting it? And the short answer is we don't have the space for the entrepreneurs to open up. What we've been finding is that they're looking for low-cost, affordable, white-boxed, quality space. It's usually pretty small. And then also clustered with a lot of other potential for retailers right around them. You look around downtown, especially with all those surface lots, and you just don't see a lot of places where you can do that. And so like I mentioned, once we get some new space online, and again, thinking about North High Street between Gay and Long, we'll have a double-loaded street with retail storefronts on both sides. We have a real opportunity there when those come online to get more than just bars and restaurants.
So a couple thoughts. Number one, I did make a point of wearing the tie that I bought at Flying Gent today. For those of you who don't know it, it's at High and Gay, very nice men's store. They now have a housewares along on Gay Street around the corner. A couple things on retail. We are at the cusp of two fundamental shifts. One is on the nature of transportation and parking. The other is on the nature of retail. And it was funny when we were doing our little pre-session. Jordan brought up her need to buy sugar, and I pulled out my phone, and I hadn't even registered for Amazon Now or Prime Now or whatever it is yet. And by the time she was done with her conversation, I had figured out that the third thing down when you search for sugar on Amazon Prime is Pop-Tarts. Honest to God truth, try it. It may be like the 10th, but it was close enough. Whether it's in downtown or in any of our neighborhoods, this idea that we're going to have streets that are full of first floor retail, and that you're going to have the ability to have that amount of retail supported, I don't know that that's true anymore. I don't know where the break is, but I think we are at an inflection point that nobody really knows what the future of retail is going to look like. And I think our downtown is going to be an interesting lab for that. I think you're going to see nodes develop where you have really good, really creative, really unique retail. The question is, how do you deal with that basic provisioning? And what does the future of that look like? And to the parking shift, we've got a couple projects going right now that are looking at needing significant amounts of parking. But the conversation is, how do you build parking in this environment when you don't know whether you're going to need it in 15 years? And how do you build parking structures that are convertible to something else? Those are the kinds of conversations that are happening. So it's going to be a really interesting time to watch how this plays out. And I think Columbus is going to be the laboratory for both of those things. And it makes sense. I mean, we've got the Smart Cities grant. We have the fantastic retail industry that we have in this city. And the trends that are going to play out in both of those are going to play out right here in downtown.
If I could add something. So I chair the Create Columbus Commission, which is a board of young professionals appointed by the mayor and council president to help advise on how we can better attract and retain our demographic. And we partnered up with Lextant, who's here, and MBBJ and Realm Collaborative to do a few focus groups with our peer demographic to better understand what is it about an urban core, an urban environment that attracts this demographic and makes it sticky and retain them. And one of the key underlying factors was this entrepreneurial spirit, and that local matters. And I think that even as things become more online, more on demand, curb space becomes more desirable as you can get things in 2 hours. There's something about the distinctive nature and the authenticity of local businesses collaborating together, being in your neighborhood, being what you support, and seeing them succeed that will always, I think, be a part of a community. So we have to continue to prioritize our local business community and the local creatives that are here, and how the downtown can be a playground for them to achieve their goals, and how we can help them do that. And I think that's really, really important that we keep that very much front and forward in our planning efforts.
You talked earlier about lifestyle, and I think that is a big challenge in Columbus. I've noticed that almost all the new housing projects in downtown build enough parking for at least one car per unit, maybe more. Given the expense of renting an apartment downtown and warehousing a car at a residential project in downtown, why would somebody ever walk to a neighborhood store when they can simply get in their car and drive to a big box store? Doesn't the kind of lifestyle that you're talking about really require a certain shift from car ownership?
Yeah, but you assume I want to drive a car. I don't want to drive a car. That's a waste of time.
But I mean, in Columbus, can that happen, do you think?
Oh, yeah, sure. It could happen if we had the real estate and we had the right, business there. Absolutely. I think here's the notion that's changing. I really don't think people want to spend 15 minutes behind a car waiting at a green light when they can't look at their phone and check out what's going on in the world, where they could be present with somebody else or do something else. Driving is frankly a waste of time. And so as things become coming to us, I think the only threat that it has to retail is to say that the amount of options are not there. So if a local retailer is selling something that you don't know how to find online, they've now created competitive advantage, right? So if a local retailer is selling the clothes that they design, like a row, right, then it's got competitive advantage and it's something you want to support. Is it going to sell me the Valentine's Day decor for my door? Probably not. At $1.50, probably not. You're probably not going to beat a Walmart, right, at that. But Amazon will, and it'll get me to my doorstep, which would remove the need to get into a car. So I do still think that there's a local component of curating a great selection of things that would take you an hour to sift through online to find that really cool item, right? Like, you want to have the really good store shop boutique person for that. You want to have the local goods that are made here. But then I do think that there's just short-term needs that will always need to be fixed. Like, I think Hills Market does a great job of grab-and-go meals. I would love to see more of that on different blocks as the density picks up, because I think that walking all the way there is still another 15-minute walk. So the tighter we can make that walkability is great. But I do think that there's this on-demand still need of a quick retail corner store that everyone will always want, whether it's hot food to go. I think the Amazon Go concept in Seattle is really, really interesting and worth paying attention to. But I don't think you'll see those go away. I just think they'll have different value.
In a few minutes, we will move to audience questions. But I want to ask one final question of all three panelists, and that is there anything happening in downtown that surprises you?
So I've thought a lot about this question. So initially I was like, no, not really.
By the way, we did not prep all these questions.
Yeah,
but
right. But when I heard this, I was like, no, not really. It's really encouraging, though. Like, the amount of change that we've seen downtown in such a short amount of time is incredible. And the way that we've got the Commons and now the Scioto, the Mile is exceptional. And the riverfront, that's amazing. I was working on the Bicentennial when, 5 years ago. And we were looking at these old cartoons from 100 years ago, and people were complaining about the riverfront. We actually did it. Like, how amazing to live in Columbus at this point in time to see this renaissance happening. That is insane. It is so encouraging. There's so much momentum. It's amazing to be a part of, and that's truly amazing. I think, though, I was having a conversation, one of the more surprising things that, after thinking harder on it, I didn't take much appreciation to was how High Street has developed. To have a main road that goes from one of the world's largest and arguably the best university to like a example of a urban neighborhood like German Village, and you can pretty much walk that whole drag now and have different experiences, from an art neighborhood to boutiques to a downtown to a Capitol building. The fact that 250 High extended the downtown skyline, the High Street corridor alone, what alignment and collaboration it's taken by so many people in the city and the university and the neighborhood associations and the business associations to really cultivate that type of growth. It's a tourism, it's just exceptional. And that type of activity, you see it growing off of High Street. But I think it really shows what's possible in Columbus and where our future is going. And I guess I am very surprised at that.
And I have my answer now, because
Okay.
we didn't script this. I am still surprised at the surface lots we have seen get developed into housing, because those parking lot operators, especially now, are making a lot of money. And so to be able to come in and buy that land, it's not just land, it's a money-making machine. To pay that premium and then turn around and be able to do a new development in an urban environment, which tends to be more expensive. So the lots along Gay Street, and I'm not saying this just because Edwards is right here, but those lots, that's just been fantastic. I never thought I'd see that happen. What we used to call Death Valley on High Street between Gay and Long, that's coming along. And then with motorists finally announcing that they're going to take all those lots in the Discovery District and get those developed. It's really remarkable.
So in my job, sort of, you get to the point where absolutely nothing surprises you, or at least I keep telling myself I'm going to get to that point. What I would say to sort of what Jordan said, what's more kind of an encouraging development that I've seen is we have absolutely great local developers, but we're starting to also see much more interest from national groups. And that is, I think, a sign that we're continuing to do things well, and we're continuing to do things right. At some level, I'm surprised and encouraged by the level of the conversations that we're having to ask. I mean, we're having to ask some fairly fundamental questions about what kind of city do we want to be. We're having to look at the paths of places like Austin and Nashville and Atlanta and ask, how do we chart our own path? I mean, when we had Aaron Wren, when CMC had Aaron Wren in a couple weeks ago, I mean, that was one of the things that I took away kind of from that conversation was, we really are at a place where we need to think about what are we going to be as a city, who are we going to be as a city, and that extends beyond downtown. I would lose my job if I didn't say, our priorities at the city are neighborhoods, neighborhoods, neighborhoods. That extends to every neighborhood that touches downtown. Tomorrow morning at the Developers Power Breakfast, shameless plug for our friends at Business First, we're going to be talking about projects in Franklinton that are like things that people never thought we would see. We're going to see development on the Near East Side, in particular along Long Street, that I think is going to be fantastic and will bring a regeneration and a new generation to a neighborhood that has been a fundamental part of our city's cultural history. That stuff's really exciting. And none of that happens without the strength of downtown.
Okay, we now move to the CMC tradition to take audience questions. Please state your name before asking your questions. We thank you in advance for not making long editorial comments. If you do, Andy Campbell will spank you.
I'm Kermit Whitfield, and I made my long editorial comments earlier, so you don't have to worry about me. I'm wondering, Jordan referred to this earlier in her remarks about the being a pedestrian downtown, and I'm a pedestrian downtown a lot, and I can tell you that you have to be hyper vigilant because you do have a lot of fast traffic, and I've often thought you could not, if you drop something when you're walking across a crosswalk, just keep walking, because by the time you've been down to pick it up, that car, which is just timed to come 6 inches after you, will hit you. And I'm just wondering what you see about the future of making, as we get more and more residents downtown, how do we make downtown more pedestrian friendly, and how quickly is that going to come?
I do not have the power to change it, but what I would love to see is us to think about the roadways and the spaces as they're used on a Saturday and Sunday. Right now, we've designed these roads for the rush hours in the morning and in the afternoons, Monday through Friday. But when you're there on Saturday and Sunday, I mean, you can walk across. I used to joke sometimes, like I could lay in the street like those old movies, hey, and no cars are coming, but we have all this real estate. How do we make? I was saying to Steve at lunch, when I was in Amsterdam, they have these really cool shipping containers that they made in all glass, and they would take one lane of a road over a bridge, and they, block it off, and you could go to this cafe and sit outside during the summer, but they made it a new pedestrian use. So they made new use out of this space, like these parklets that Jess Matthews does is wonderful. And the more that we can just activate the space as if we're designing for the people that are here, I think we could have a whole new culture downtown, and we could have a whole new priority, which should be about people, in my view.
So, a couple things. One is at the city, we're highly attuned to it. We had a very tragic thing with two of our staff a couple years ago that died at Broughton High. I've got a member of my team who about a year ago was crossing the street. A young woman was texting and got hit by a car, and fortunately she's fine. I'm not going to call her out. She's here. But, there are places where it's dangerous. Now, the heresy that I'm going to say is cars are really important. And 3rd and 4th Street, getting people in and out of downtown and to their homes in the suburbs is fundamentally important to the functioning of the city. So there's got to be a balance. We've got to find the right places to slow the traffic down. But at the end of the day, for at least the next 30 years, we still got to get people in and out of downtown. So there's going to be places where we do that.
But then my question would be is how do we get people to not just use one car all the time? So how can we amplify how can we decrease the amount of cars coming downtown? So how can we get more people in one vehicle? How can we be amplifying the car sharing activities?
I think we should put a car sharing tax on residents of Delaware County
There we go.
that are outside the city.
Right. He said it, not me.
That was almost entirely facetious.
Carrots and sticks.
Good afternoon. Great program. My name's Charlie Rodenfels. I live downtown. I'm in the Boogie Works. I didn't walk over here, I'm ashamed to say. I have a Vespa. I'm a certified metrosexual. I think I want to start my comment with a question, if I could. How many people in this audience has, in the last year, bought a lampshade? There's a few. Now, that sounds a little weird. Work with me. It's going to go somewhere. Over on North High Street, I think at about 2nd Street on the corner, there's a gal who has a lampshade business. Now, I go in there to buy a lampshade, and I have this conversation. What are you doing with a lampshade store that's all you do is sell lampshades? It just kind of caught my attention. And then I said, and then even to make that even more complex to try to get in my brain, why here? There's no parking. I rode my Vespa. You could get there on a bus. I guess where I want to go with this discussion is, she's got a great business. She was excited to tell me about her business. And are the successful retail people here in the downtown area, are they in this conversation? I don't think they are. I think we all want to have that conversation, but I don't think we're bringing those retailers in. The guy that has the tie shop that, Steve, you talked about, you bought your tie from, is he in the conversation? Or Anthropology, which has got pretty substantial investment, or Row. I don't know if they're in the conversation, and I don't know what caught their attention to say, I'm willing to take the risk. And if they've been successful, share what's made it successful. It's a long comment.
What's really hard, though, with a lot of these retailers, one of the people we highlighted in the report, I thought she would actually make a great panel member, but she's a one-person operation. So when she leaves, she has to close up. And that's not good for business, especially if you want regular hours and predictable hours for customers. We Capital Crossroads, over the last few years, had somebody who has been trying to make inroads with potential retailers downtown, and again, generated a lot of interest, but our hurdle keeps coming back to having the right space to put them in.
Yeah, and I'll give you an example, and I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be the moderator, not the speaker, but we met with Marc Wood, the wood companies in the Short North. They did much of the retail space in the Short North. They started in 1985 renovating buildings in the Short North. And Marc, the wood companies, has never leased a retail space that wasn't white boxed first. In other words, prepared so that the tenant could go in, paint the walls, and open a business. And the wood companies always bought property and clustered their space so that they would lease not one, but maybe a dozen spaces that were contiguous to each other. And so they created an environment where independent retail, and that's the only supply potential supply we've got for downtown. Because I can tell you, Bath & Body Works is not interested in downtown Columbus right now. And so knowing that, what does it take to get independent operators in downtown? And we've not done that, with some exceptions.
Hi, Cleve. Jeff Milgram, Event Marketing Strategies. There's been a lot of talk about housing and also retail on the northern part of downtown. You've talked about Gay Street, Long Street, Short North. I haven't heard a lot of talk today about East Main Street downtown, as well as the redevelopment of the Brewery District, which has really been happening over the last few years. And also now that cars can come right off of I-70 East, take you right onto Mound Street, right into downtown, which I think is great. I've been hearing that finally, after maybe a decade, they're going to be doing the same thing coming off of I-70, changing the Fulton ramp, dumping you off onto Mound as well, I guess, and maybe putting a cap over there, over 70, just like in the Short North. Can you maybe shed some light on that?
Go ahead.
Well, yeah, ODOT is getting started to start looking at that new entrance when you come in from the west. And with that change on Mound Street, I think you are, what was a very sleepy part of downtown suddenly now is one of the major entrances into downtown. And so I think you're going to see a new emphasis on that portion. But again, one of the issues is going to be, since it's a one-lane, multi-lane, one-way road coming into downtown, we got to make sure that sheer volume and speed of traffic doesn't take away from getting good ground floor activity.
You know, a couple things. One is I think our friends at Columbus Downtown Development Corp., when you talk about Main Street, look at that as a corridor that's really interesting, and how do we take both of those streets and really look at development along there. You know, when you talk about the importance of the work that ODOT's doing on the 70-71 split and those kinds of things, I think it's vitally important. And I was just looking to see, is it, when Tim Keene comes in, I think there should be like 15 questions for him about, or comments to him about the importance of making sure that ODOT's properly funded and has funds to do those kinds of great projects. So it's vitally important to downtown. I mean, what happens with 70 and 71 and the pace of that construction project, when you talk about how people see our city for the first time, and you talk about how people come into our city, that's their first impression. And so the ability to do the kinds of great things that we did with the cap on the north side, and how do we connect the Brewery District and German Village to the south side of downtown, that's all, again, when you talk about things that we all need to be paying attention to over the next 5 to 10 years, that's really critical.
Jane Scott with the Metropolitan Club. I'm curious, we haven't really talked about any kind of creative reuse. We have office buildings on Capitol Square. We're in the Metropolitan Club is in the Chase building, and our building is probably 50–60% empty, but it has amazing open floors with great views of the Capitol, and it just seems like it's screaming for something. Is there, number one, are the building owners open for ideas of creative reuse? Does zoning allow it? And what kinds of things can the city or the community do to incentivize or take obstacles away so that maybe some of that could be reused for boutique retail or maybe even living?
There's a little part of me that is tempted to call out a couple people in the room and ask them to tell us what their plans are, but I won't do that. In terms of the specifics on your question, Jane, there isn't really a zoning restriction. Folks can do, it's not really so much an impediment with the city. It really, as I said earlier, a lot of it comes down to financing and how people can get projects financed and what the folks with the capital think of different kinds of projects.
And I would just add that with some of these projects or some of these buildings, doing adaptive reuse into residential might be an option. If the floor plate is small enough, that'll be good because residential prefers that. You think about the Lazarus building, that would have never worked as residential. Those floor plates were just so huge. But we got that building renovated and back into office use at least. And then I think, and I'm not going to call out any particular building, but I think generally what we've seen with repositioning of buildings, even if they stay as office space, if they're office now and stay as office after a renovation, you need somebody new to come in who can buy it at a discount so they have some cash to then reinvest back into the property.
We have time for one more question. Java?
Thank you so much, Java Kittrick. One, there is such a thing as distracted walking, and it could be your fault. No, seriously. Two, that in other big cities, they do sell condominium parking spaces, and if people are concerned about how to fund the parking lot, condo spaces for sale is a really, really good idea. And I was sorry to see that Franklinton didn't have park and ride into downtown, and I think that there are still opportunities, maybe in the fairgrounds and in town and country, for park and ride to get people downtown. And I do agree with Jordan that you still need a car to go shopping.
Well, I will just mention, CODA is relaunching their transit system, basically. On May 1st, the new transit system redesign goes into effect. It's the first time ever they've really taken a comprehensive look at all their lines. We're going to see better service, more frequent service. We're going to see less of a need for people to come downtown in order to transfer, which will actually speed up their rides. And they're expecting a boost in ridership just from the redesign without adding any new service. So I think that's going to get not just people in downtown, but people throughout the community, give them another chance to look at CODA as an option. And we don't need everyone to switch. We have about 5% of the downtown workforce taking transit right now. If we just double that to 10%, that'd be fantastic.
I will turn this back over to Kermit.
Thank you, Cleve. Thanks for the conversation, everybody, and I hope you've enjoyed today's Steve Schoeney birthday forum. We encourage you to continue the conversation with coffee and cookies.
That is the worst thing about Facebook, is that everyone then finds out when your birthday is. So thank you for the well wishes.
You can view and share today's forum and all of our forums on CTV, Columbus Television, on WOSU and PBS affiliates statewide, and through the Ohio channel, and anytime on CMC's website via YouTube. Please help me thank our sponsor, the Edwards Companies. And our speakers, Cleve Ricksecker, Marc Conte, Steve Schoeney, and Jordan Davis. And thanks to all of you for being here.